The Owen Hart Cup finals are crowned. Finally, MJF is creating new stars, and AEW has two solid shows back to back. Are we turning the tide and are we getting it right? I brought up the point a week ago about how they're getting their stars back slowly, and the ratings are going up. Not just necessary ratings, but quality of programming. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype Ballard, back at it again with the AEW Dynamite Owen Hart Foundation Cup results and thoughts. Let's get in. We start out first. I want to just say thank you to all my colleagues over at thefansprowrestling.com. Got all kinds of great podcasts over there, like Ted's Takes, Wrestling Fans Insight, the list goes on. But we open up with a recap of MJF's explanation, turning heel on Daniel Garcia last week. Basically, he doesn't like the fans turn their backs on him at World's End with Samoa Joe. He's back to being not just our scumbag, but an overall scumbag. Ultimately, Garcia coming into play here, but this is building towards Will Ospreay going at it against MJF. And as the bidding war of 2024 is being referenced here, and how Tony Khan wanted to spend money on wrestlers like Will Ospreay that would elevate AEW and not bury it. That being a kind of a key for this marquee matchup. And where is this matchup going to take place, you ask? Well, it's going to be Dynamite 250. That's right, live on cable TV. You're ultimately going to see, some people will argue and say, well, this should be all in. But I feel like AEW's building to something with this promo. We get MJF back there drinking his wine. We get Will Ospreay doing his thing in the ring. It's felt kind of classic, old school. Little shades of the overall. We look at Daniel Garcia as the wild card in this factor. Daniel Garcia looking to possibly interfere in this matchup at AEW 250. And then ultimately, maybe even going on to All In. But let's go ahead and move on. We got the first Owen Hart Cup matchup here for the male finals. And we've got Bryan Danielson. We've also got Hangman Adam Page in a pay-per-view quality matchup here, about 25 minutes. And I will say, Jeff Jarrett having a purpose in this tournament. Remember when we got some interview time explaining why Owen Hart was important to Jeff Jarrett? Remember we talked about possibly Jeff Jarrett in the tournament and doing some, something meaningful connected to Owen. Jeff Jarrett serves that purpose as the special enforcer in this one, as we get a back-to-back matchup. We get some guys busted open. We get Page chopping away in the corner. We get everything you would expect from the American Dragon. We get some German suplexes. Ultimately, what you guys do know that we get is a winner. This took some time to get going originally in the beginning, but it did reach a high level at the 25-minute mark, ending it. Danielson winning, and he is your AEW Owen Hart Cup winner, with Martha Hart and Jeff Jarrett awarding the trophy and the cup to Bryan Danielson. They were having Danielson go all the way back, and then we get a little bit of Hangman Adam Page being a little bit of a heel in this matchup. The music, the attitude coming out, and then ultimately what we see is a final, solid win for Bryan Danielson. I actually could have seen this going either way. I did have Bryan Danielson winning this, but an argument would have been made for Hangman Adam Page to win this Owen Cup, getting a title shot at All In, which I think would have been amazing to see. Swerve Strickland, Hangman Adam Page, Part 3. Each of them got to win, and who can forget that Texas death match all the way back from last year. But we do get Bryan Danielson getting his moment in the sun against Swerve Strickland, and I'll be interested to see what those two can put together in the ring. We move on and putting together, we've got the learning tree putting its branches together a little more, and then we've got ultimately Samoa Joe versus Chris Jericho in a street fight. That's a Stampede street fight. Ultimately, we're going to call it a Davey Stampede street fight. But Joe takes Jericho's hat and punches him through it and then hits an enziguri in the corner. Jericho slugs away. He gets sent to the outside in this one. Meantime, we get a bag of horseshoes. Jericho drops those horseshoes, grabs the wall, and we basically get in and out to the break. But we get Joe going for a coquina clutch, only to have Chris Jericho break it up. Joe is whipped with a belt, put on a forklift, and Jericho drives a forklift into the back through a wall. And the match is actually stopped at the 12-minute mark. And then at that point, we get Samoa Joe being thrown into an ambulance and waved by as he was placed in and taken for treatment. Next up, we have a Claudio Castagnoli versus Pac versus Kyle Fletcher versus Ishii. And the winner gets the international title shot on this one. And it's going to be a brawl, and Ishii and Claudio being left alone just to slug it out. Ishii shoulders Claudio, but Pac is put in the missile drop kick. And then we get a back up, and Ishii fires off some suplexes until Claudio gut-wrench suplexes him down. Ultimately, go back a little bit further. Ishii and Fletcher are striking it out. Further up in the matchup, we then get a sharpshooter moment. Castagnoli grabs a giant swing. Fletcher then grabs the sharpshooter. Pac adds a springboard elbow and puts on a brutalizer to Fletcher. While the sharpshooter is still on, Ishii breaks it up and hits a suplex. We then go a little bit further in the match, and we get Pac German suplexing everyone, and he hits the Black Arrow into a horror rough finish and beats Fletcher at the 11-minute 20-second mark, roughly. Ultimately, this is what you'd expect in a AEW Fatal 4-Way match. And with that being, Pac is going to get your international title championship shot, and I'm okay with that. I feel like, it's a great way to highlight Pac a little bit. He's had a recent return, and he is an AEW original as well. So, way to give him due against the Fatal 4-Way here. And then we get to the main event. That's right, we've got the women's. Well, before that, we do get a little bit of Mercedes Moné celebrating her double title win. And then she heard Britt Baker talking about the past, present, and future, which is appropriate because Moné is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. A nice play in Canada for that one in Stampede. But Baker basically toasts herself, and then that's the end of that. At that point, Baker comes in and does a run-in. We have Cutler has been attacked in the back, too, but we get Darby Allin, who calls out Jack Perry for next week. He's coming for them at AEW 250. Now we get to the women's. Mariah May versus Willow Nightingale for the AEW Women's Owen Hart Foundation Tournament Finals. And May and Toni Storm, May has Luther and Toni Storm at her side to help her, and her gear is Owen Hart inspired with the pink and black. But we also have Nightingale with a yellow and black Owen Hart. It's time for a change. Throwback inspired outfit for the evening. Back up, we get some hard hits, running drop kick. We get some legs back and forth. We get May in a little quick back and forth, and then we get a old Sting shirt making an appearance for a distraction, allowing Storm to grab a referee. And then we get Chris Statlander to kick Nightingale in the head in mid-match. It's Stokely Hathaway getting involved with the Sting shirt. And May hits a running knee to the head for 1 and a 2. May bridging roll-up gets a 1 and a 2. But Nightingale's lariats get the same exact thing. And the cannonball hits May. But a Death Valley driver is countered into a victory roll, giving Mariah May the pin at the 12-minute mark for the Women's Owen Hart Cup Finals. And I will say this. We got some really good stuff here. Tony Khan really going main event. But what happened next was the main thing everybody was talking about. Not just the match, not just the Owen Hart Cup, but it was the main event too. The post-match beatdown of May and Storm as they skip to the top of the stage. And May blasts Storm in the face with the belt. And then May unloads on Luther with the belt as well. And kicks a bleeding, bloodied Toni Storm from her head. Screaming, why? Why? And at that point, she rubs Storm's bloody head as the fans are cheering as the show ends. Awesome, amazing stuff here from Mariah May. And I will say, this now sets up the matchup. Toni Storm, Mariah May for your Women's Championship. And this is AEW building new stars. This is AEW making a push for the future in this main event, and this is going to be worth it at All In. Guys, if you like wrestling, hit that like button. I appreciate all you guys being here. Thank you for coming back. If you're a subscriber or you're just a first-timer, welcome. Let's get into our final thoughts. So, overall, AEW is 2 weeks in a row with solid shows and solid booking overall. AEW develops some storylines. What we see is actual storylines being built up. We not only have the OWEN HART Cup coming to a wraps tonight, but we also got Blood and Guts slowly being built. That's going to be showing up in about 2 weeks in an AEW arena. We also get building storylines towards the champion Swerve Strickland and the women's champion Toni Storm, with Mariah May and Bryan Danielson respectfully getting their title shots at All In against the two champs. And I feel like that's going to give a fresh perspective, and it's going to be exciting to see what these guys do in front of a big crowd. And furthermore, AEW also booking storylines with MJF versus Will Ospreay at Dynamite 250. While that could be a main pay-per-view matchup, I do believe that's just going to be a taste. We could get a crooked finish on this one, but then again, MJF is not opposed to having big matches. I think back to his Kenny Omega match at Collision over a year and a half ago against Kenny Omega and MJF. And that, to me, was one of the greatest matches on AEW television of all time. Well, guys, those are my results and thoughts. Thank you for joining as always. Leave a comment down below. We'll chat a little more. I'm going to head out. Like, share, subscribe. It's not goodbye. It's game over.